We're live. All right. Awesome. Okay. So for
Right on.
those that weren't with us before we went live, Russ is producer, interviewer, and overseer of this. We had some technical fun, but we're here. We made it, Michael. So I'm really happy to have you on. I first connected with you uh, on Clubhouse. So the one good thing to come out of Clubhouse in 2021 was me hearing you talk all about your work with the Rehab Lab and some of the NFL players and all that. So, um, I why don't you just introduce yourself and kind of break down, I guess maybe a little of that interaction, but what you do and why I thought you'd be so valuable for injuries today.
Yeah, that was a fun conversation. I remember that one vividly. There were a lot of really cool questions that came out of that clubhouse, and essentially, from my recollection, it came down to how these tests are administered and how the players train for these tests, and just kind of how they can be manipulated, what the scores actually mean, and that was a really fun conversation. But yeah, I'm Dr. Michael Risher. I am a Chicago-based sports performance chiropractor. Had a background in kind of this performance training. We worked with a bunch of high school, college, professional athletes, and specifically every year we'd have a group of guys training for the combine and their pro days. So we would do all of their preparation from nutrition, strength training, speed training, agility, prepping them for these tests that you'll see in the combine specifically. And then, after I realized I wanted to do more than just train athletes, I went back to school, got my doctorate, and then started my own practice in 2020. And, honestly, COVID was a sort of miraculous for me because I have no explanation other than God just put people in my lives, and I started having the ability and access to these professional athletes. And at this point, worked with over 100 professional athletes across a bunch of different sports. We do training, like physical preparation. I don't do skill training necessarily, so I'm not out here training wide receivers or quarterbacks on how to actually do their task. But we do a lot of the physical preparation, some mental preparation, the rehab, recovery. Right now we're in the off season, so I've got a bunch of guys that are either back in Chicago or I think I'm going to be flying out to, down south to work with a guy or two this upcoming week, and just kind of, that whole what do they want to get out of this off season as they, taking a month off after the football season here to let their body recover, and we start to ramp it back up. And then in season, work with guys weekly on their injury rehab in conjunction with the team. So I don't work with the team. I contract directly with the players, and basically, do extra on top of what they do in the training room, help them with their injuries that are both reported and things that are minor bumps and bruises, and we just get them as close to 100% every Sunday as we can. And then also work with general population in our clinic downtown.
Yes. And so if you guys didn't just hear all that and say, oh, I can see why this is relevant to what Russell Clay does, which is, I cover the NFL, I cover college football, and I came away from this year almost saying to myself, I need to recalibrate my view of the NFL because things are much different now over the last maybe 3 to 5 years than they were 20, 30 years ago when I started watching the NFL. Number one, and we'll get back into, some of your background as well. But the number one thing for me coming out of this year was we knew the quarterback injuries was a huge storyline, whether it was coming into the year and then how it bared out during the year. But I'm just wondering, first question for you, why do you think I am 100% confident there are more injuries now that are understood and seen compared to 20 years ago? I don't necessarily think there are more injuries. I just think we're much more aware of them. And I just kind of want to open that topic up to you and see where you go with it, because we had the Phil Rivers playing the playoff game with the torn ACL. Probably doesn't happen today. We had, insane hits, but I just wonder, and I look across all sports, everything's changing in the regular season. Guys are sitting. I mean, what you do is so incredibly valuable for these players, but we have so much more awareness of these guys' bodies now, right?
Yeah, I really think the injuries are probably fairly similar. There may be some more torn ligaments because, rule changes and you're tackling around the knees a little bit more because you're not allowed to hit guys in the head. So I think maybe the nature of the injury has changed slightly with the rules, but I think the number is probably pretty similar. And what you really are starting to get, in my opinion, and why these become so high profile is guys are looking at the longevity of their careers versus, selling out for a game or two. And so, which I think is really valuable for the players. There are things that people probably, a decade ago would have pushed through, but it's a different mentality. You're playing for a long career now versus, I'm just trying to get back for one more game. So I think there's a big like mindset shift that's happened, and probably for the better. Probably these guys' bodies are going to be way better off in 10, 20 years, because they're taking care of themselves in season versus, oh yeah, I have XYZ and scar tissue just piles up. These head injuries pile up. These ligament injuries pile up. So they're actually giving themselves time to heal. There may be a middle ground where you can push it a little bit harder, push guys to get back a little bit faster and not have that long-term detriment to their health. But I think that's likely what we're seeing is it's become so much more publicized, and especially with the great job the NFLPA has done, you're seeing guys just protect themselves more.
Yeah, and protect that value they have. And of course, we're starting to monetize the college football as well, where these guys get these NIL deals. And, I cover college football during the season as well. A lot of these guys are like, hey, wait a minute. I'm not playing through this. I got candy bar money coming in now. And, I got to protect my brand. We're seeing guys sit out the bowl games at totally historic rates. And these are things we looked at in 2005 to 2010. We're like, why aren't they doing this? And then it just took a few major injuries in those games to say, all right, agents, get in there, figure this out, protect these guys, and and go from there. But going back for one sec, so you're in Chicago now. Did you grow up there?
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in Palatine, and then went and played football at Wheaton College, Division III school. We actually, really high end Division III. We finished 8th in the country my senior year, I believe. Played with a couple guys that ended up having short stints in the NFL. So, I was nowhere near that, but there's some good talent that can come out of there. Some high level players that can come out of there. And then worked kind of in the northern suburbs and after school, and was like, what, if I don't get out of this small area of Chicago, I'm going to stay in the suburbs forever. So I moved out to California for 4 years for chiropractic school. Lived a mile from Levi's Stadium.
Wow.
So I had a minor 49ers loyalty this past Super Bowl. But yeah, that's kind of where I grew up. So I grew up a Bears fan. And then I found myself no real college loyalty. So I found myself really falling in love with certain college players and loving their game. And so now I'm more of like an NFL player fan, and it's transitioned to more and more of me being fans of players and their play style than truly, just being a diehard Bears fan. I'll always support the Bears. You're not gonna change loyalties there, but it's a lot more of like, wow, I really appreciate the way this guy plays, and so I'm going to follow him versus only following the Bears. And I think fantasy football probably played a little bit of a role in that. I'm a little bit of a Debbie guy myself, so I'm I like that sort of thing, and it's kind of shaped the way that I view the human body. Shaped like me scouting players has shaped the way that I through fantasy football has actually shaped the way that I am able to treat. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, and adding on to that, I mean, I can't imagine as a kid you were thinking you were going to be working with NFL, or maybe you did. Maybe you were like, this is gonna be how my life works. But there was a video of you with Allen Robinson on your site. There's Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney and all those Bears guys. So I guess talk a little bit about what it's like to kind of, I mean, maybe how that started and how cool it is to kind of like not only be using your doctorate for, people like me who are like, hey, my knee kind of hurts, versus like David Montgomery who's like, hey, my hamstring, get it back so I can
Mm-hmm.
play next week.
Yeah, it was a really cool. Like honestly, if COVID doesn't shut everything down, I don't have half the opportunities that I have this quickly. So I opened up my clinic January 1st of 2020, which is a phenomenal year to start an in-person business. But basically, when everything shut down, the Bears players were still holding throwing sessions on their own. They weren't allowed to go into the facility. And so I had a couple players reach out to me and they said, hey, would you be willing to come, work with us, prep our bodies for these throwing sessions? And, someone tweaks a hammy, someone tweaks a back as they're throwing. I get to go up to them and say, hey, this is what we can do to fix it. And, it worked out really well, and then the referrals just keep going from there. Tons of Instagram DMs. Like you would be floored at the people that have answered my Instagram DMs. Just superstars across the league that I've gotten to talk to and meet because of that. And it was honestly like just a huge blessing from God that COVID shut the world down so that I was able to get this opportunity. 'Cause like you said, I always wanted to play in the NFL or the MLB, but didn't quite make it there. So being able to work with these athletes and be, so invested in their careers is the next best thing for me. It's absolute blast. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started in that, and now just the referrals just kind of grow and grow and grow, and it really feels like, not that I want access to every player, but if there's anyone in the NFL that I really wanted to try to get a hold of, it feels like that's totally within reach.
Hmm.
So that's like a really fun, cool perk to have. I was watching a bunch of guys that I worked on that played in the Super Bowl, and now I get to cheer them on as well.
Oh yeah, and that's like, you have players on your dynasty team or you got a prospect that's coming up versus like, hey, I know this guy, I worked with this guy. It's kind of like an investment thing where you're like, I want
Mm-hmm.
this guy to do well now. So in terms of, doing all this work and kind of breaking this down, so the rates of injuries we've kind of established, maybe they're not increasing. They are more aware of them. Players are protecting themselves. But in terms of this with like fantasy football specifically, we're in a really weird space with like a season long league because the coaching staffs are now just going to sit guys or play them half a game. Are these conversations that go on with the players like, no, the public doesn't know, but this guy he's like got a minor ankle injury and they're going to give him like less snaps this week. I know they're going on, and I'm sitting there some weeks like, I think that guy got nicked up that play, but I don't have the inside access to, talk to these guys. So are those conversations going on?
Yeah, there. I mean, to some extent, there might be some limited snaps. There's way more that goes on behind the injury report that's not made public. That they say as much as they need to fulfill the requirement, but especially, and I find some organizations are a little more a little more like gamesman-y with this than others, but they're saying just enough to you know meet the requirement of what they're supposed to disclose, but not enough where anyone can really have a true idea of what's actually going on. Um, for the most part, though, the players don't want to suit up if they're not going to be 100% or if they're not going to be given the full snap load. So as far as like, and this is a generalization, as far as the players go, when they're suiting up, they're assuming, mostly a full workload, or they'll have an idea ahead of time if they're ramping back up from injury. They'll have an idea ahead of time, like, hey, this is the exact number of snaps you're going to get, and you're going to get no more. So they kind of can keep track of that. But if the guy, if the player is suiting up, they know that they're going 100% or they're not playing. And if they do have a limited snap count, they're going 100% on those snaps. Otherwise, they're not playing and especially as you get more towards the contract years, guys don't want to go have a bad game on film and a bad statistical game. So it's better for them to sit out a game than it is for them to get half the snaps for a game just next contract wise.
Yeah, so some nerd like Russell Clay doesn't tweet out, this guy's running for 3.2 yards per carry. He's not fast anymore. Exactly. He stinks. Yeah. No,
exactly. And honestly, like I think the analytics piece is joked about, but that totally comes into play for these contract negotiations, because the way that it comes up is you'll likely get a player comparison. It's like, hey, we're basing your contract based off of your production, which compares best to this player. This is what they got paid, and so this is your market value based on your production. And a lot of that goes into a per game basis. Typically, it's not just, oh, look at the entire season. You go into a per game basis, and so the more efficient you are, the better you are on a per game basis, the more you have the potential to earn. So we joke about it a lot, but it's like the teams very much will find whatever they can do to leverage this, and the players will find whatever they can do to leverage themselves into better deals. And so you just want the most best possible production. And I think that's why players are sitting out a little bit more, is because, like, you know what, I could probably push through this a little bit and play, but is it worth everything that I could possibly be sacrificing for it?
Totally. And that makes so much sense. A next sort of topic I want to dive into here is my personal experience with my knee. So my knee, and actually I saw the Allen Robinson video before I saw you on Clubhouse, and I didn't put together any of that, and I was on my own sort of recovery journey, which has gone successful because I met up with people like you, and I got to learn about how my entire body's connected and how my knee is a hip thing, and I got to do stretches, and my body's not perfectly aligned. So with some of these athletes, they go to the D1 schools, they have right away, they have these guys with eyes on them, like, all right, this guy, you have to adjust your workout this way because one side is stronger than the other, or you've been getting injuries to this because you haven't been adjusting to this. And I guess we're getting a little in the weeds here, but this is kind of what you do, right? You evaluate players' bodies and where there's imbalances. I also think one of the reasons, players got hurt in the past is they didn't have necessarily in the 80s and 90s, they didn't have people telling them to adjust to that. They were also running in like work boots, so that was a problem as well. But, with mine, I kind of looked at this, and you can't unsee some of this stuff once you see it in yourself, and you're like, that was like an 8 out of 10 pain. And then I did stretches and little workouts and it went away. Like, how many people in the world are just walking around in a lot of pain for no reason?
It's incredible how many people can get rid of their pain easily and don't quite realize it. Like, I always tell people, getting out of pain's not the hard part, it's staying out of pain. Like, there's always a very straightforward path to what's going to heal the injury. It's not necessarily ice and rest, although rest definitely can help not provoke it again. But there are a ton of soft tissue things. I like to say, like, if we can override the brain's protective mechanism of an injury, we can rehab much more efficiently. And so there's a lot of stuff that you can do that people don't necessarily realize, and then they come work with me or work with someone like me, and they understand the impact that even an hour session can have on the quality of their life and their pain. So um, it's one thing to be like, oh, my knee hurts if I do lunges or squats, and then you don't do lunges or squats for a couple days, and it's like, oh, my knee's not bothering me during that. But with these athletes, um, they're using their bodies to such a high level every single day that they're not going to not feel it, right? If they have a minor thing, they need to stay on top of it as much as possible, because every single day they are going out and using it. They don't have the luxury of taking a week or two off. They're going to have to get on top of it early, and so the sooner guys recognize that, the better for them. But that's something that once they realize, like, oh, I can make a massive jump in this thing pretty quickly. There's no coming back, and they just want to keep working on their stuff.
So that brings up a few topics. Number one, you were working with David Montgomery a little bit, right? And he's a guy
I got
who
his jersey.
there
His
you
jersey
go.
right up there.
So when you look at his career, right? Maybe we can. Let's see, producer Russ. Can we do it? Can we do it? Where is he? There he is. Okay. So when you look at his career, right? He's playing almost full seasons every year. He's missing a few games here and there. He's a running back. But there were certain plays where it looked like he was going to be out for the season, right? He took some brutal hits to the knee. He had some hamstring injuries. And then I clearly remember it's like the next week he's playing. And I mean, when you get a situation like that where a guy is doing that, I'm like, what is going on? Because I saw the injury. He got hit directly somewhere, and, he basically got carted off. So when that happens, I mean, are you like running to the back, or is he like coming to you the next day like, hey, I got a week to get this figured out? What's going on?
Yeah, the one thing I gotta say about David Montgomery is that dude is Wolverine. I've never seen anything like his ability to recover and heal from these injuries. Like that guy is genetically, there's something that makes him heal faster. It's absolutely ridiculous. Just him personally, him specifically, like that dude's Wolverine. But like something like that happens, and yeah, I know that I'm texting the guy after the game like, hey, how are we doing? If it's a serious enough injury, I know that they're going to get all imaging and stuff like that going right away. After the game, Monday at the latest, they'll have these MRIs set up, and so we'll know. Like, a lot of patients come in, and I don't really care about the MRI. I can figure stuff out. But the nice thing is all the MRIs and X-rays are done instantly with these NFL guys. So beyond a shadow of a doubt what structures you're dealing with, which makes the job so much easier. From there, the team has rehab stuff that they will start them on. And my job is to fill in the gaps. What are things that we can do that will make it more efficient? And there's a bunch of professionals like me, across the country that guys will use. I know a bunch of guys that work with different teams, and we have a group chat of all these NFL docs. If a guy goes from one team to another, it's a good referral system, but also like, hey, I got this injury going on. Does anyone have a good rehab protocol for that? So basically, you watch the injury, you assess it, and then team will do their eval, and then we can get to work on it. As long as we're not overdoing it, we check with what the team's doing, and we make sure that we're enhancing it. We're doing stuff that they may not have time for or may not see. That way, they're getting treatment not only at the facility, but then they come home and they get more treatment as well. We have certain devices that a lot of them have, and I'll show them how to use that to just further the recovery. So it's like you see an injury on field, or even someone just take a hit and they play through it. And I know that I'm texting the guy, hey, how's your shoulder? How's your ankle? How's your knee? How's your hip? Whatever. Like, what's going on there? And then, we'll figure out the best treatment plan. Me as an accessory to what the team's doing, because it's not like they say, you know what, team, screw you. I'm just working with this guy. I have to, supplement and enhance what the team's doing.
Hmm. And so the other half of this, right? We have David Montgomery, who recovers like Wolverine. He's back out there. He's fine. He's cutting back on that knee, no problem. But there is and you already mentioned this, there is a mental element of this, like a psychology of like getting these guys, especially if they suffer a major injury. Nick Chubb, obviously went down this year with that major injury, but I mean, this guy's had a long NFL career after a really, really brutal knee injury at Georgia. Some other guys might go the other way there and maybe not recover mentally, even though they recovered physically, right? I mean, this is probably like a whole other element of recovering from injury, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of time, I mean, at a certain point, it is very mental because you're going to have the tissue healing regardless. There may be some range of motion loss. If you watch Kyle Pitts, he did not have full range of motion in his knee. Even after all the rehab, he just wasn't 100%. But he was out there playing
Let's
because
go.
it was probably,
Let's go, Kyle.
It was probably
Come on, baby.
not painful, but you could easily tell that he did not have full range of motion there. And he's playing through that. So that tells me, he's very mentally tough, that he can go out and trust his knee, even though there's not that full range yet. Some guys you'll see just kind of protect themselves, and NFL players are mentally tough. You have to be, but they're different degrees. I was working with someone, and it was basically like he would do something 50% after an injury, and he's like, oh, that didn't hurt. And then something clicked in his head, and he just was able to go 100% immediately. So once his brain registered, hey, this isn't injured anymore, now all of a sudden he could kick it up to 100% instantly because he had that mental override. Not everyone has that where they experience something small and then they can immediately go 100%. But the guys that do, again, it's really hard. If I have a conversation with someone, I can tell pretty quickly which guys are going to have that that instinct and that in them. But it's really hard to tell unless you have one-on-one conversations and you're actually in the rehab process to know which ones are going to mentally get there faster than, some guys that may mentally never recover.
All right. So I'm going to bring in a guy near and dear to my heart here. Todd Gurley. This guy was immense. One of the best football players in the league, one of the best college players in the league. Went top 10 in the NFL draft. And I was with him since his true freshman season, when he was, kicking ass, beating up on Buffalo on kick returns. And he suffered that major injury. Still goes high in the draft. Clearly it wasn't totally flagged when he gets to the league. Has about 3 or 4 years of pretty much no talk of it. I mean, at the end of 2017 and 2018, he was they were limiting his snaps towards the end of the year. It wasn't like, LaDainian Tomlinson were giving this dude 450 touches. And in the playoffs every year, he was worn down, and you could tell, and he wasn't at his best by the end of the year. And then that rumor came out in 2018, 2019, where it was like, this is bone on bone. This probably isn't going to last much longer. Now, he did play 2 more years. 6-year career as a running back is amazing, plus the 3 years in college. Really special guy, but when you get a situation like that, there are certain things that maybe are, I think of Brandon Roy in basketball as well, where it's like, there is a certain point where it's like, what can you really do, right?
So what you'll learn about me, you have enough conversations with me. I'm one of the biggest optimists you'll ever meet. I always think there's something you can do.
Sure.
There's very few times where it's like, yeah, you're just done here. Um, Now I can't speak to Todd Gurley specifically what he was doing, but to me the process becomes, can we can we get you out of pain? Like, what does that look like to get out of pain? For a knee, maybe you're getting the gel injections to, to work on that bone on bone. Um, Rehab, stim, all the stuff that you can do to get out of pain. But once you're out of pain, you have to find a way to restore the function. And this is I operate specifically like this. I avoid scary terms like bone on bone because to me that doesn't mean too much, but in
Yeah.
a patient's head it will change their mentality. So if someone comes to me and says, yeah, I have really bad arthritis in my knee, I say, okay, great. I'm more taking note of that person thinking that their knee is degenerative than what's actually going on. There may be a point where the
Wow.
degeneration is beyond what we can repair, and you can see the how it's deformed, and they may need a knee replacement. But in someone who's in their late 20s, early 30s, that's something that typically can, if we can fix that mental part, if we can do our phrasing properly, if we can, get the pain gone and get the brain to override that pain protective mechanism, we can restore function, really, really significantly. And so, again, I never worked with Todd Gurley. I don't have any specific insight on him,
Sure.
but for me, that's my process of, can we use language that is empowering, not scary and debilitating? Can we dissociate what's going on from the diagnosis? Can we get rid of the pain, at least temporarily, and then can we use that to restore the function? And if that's the process, as soon as we get to the function piece, you're winning. And so a lot of the guys get a diagnosis and then are afraid of the diagnosis, and then that mentally tanks them. And I think if we
Wow.
can use better language, and I feel this way about my Gen Pop patients as well, if we can use better language to describe what's going on, less scary language, still descriptive enough, but less, let's attach to this diagnosis, and this diagnosis is who I am. Like, that's where we see the real mental breakthrough, because the physical piece, again, I think especially in your late 20s, early 30s, there's very little that we can't, rehab, especially if there's been a surgery. There's very little that we can't get back to mostly full function.
I love this. I love everything that you just said. I was 29 and I was like, I have a bad knee. And I got that messaging from like 15 years old. You know, I had Osgood Schlatter's and it was like, I have a
Mm-hmm.
bad knee. I have a bad knee. I have a bad knee. And I get with these people and within 6 months, I'm like, what the hell? I don't have a bad knee anymore. Like, so clearly, not every situation is the same, but in this new era of sports, we're seeing guys play till mid to late 30s, sometimes into their 40s. You're telling me Tom Brady didn't have a ton of stuff going on over the years, or LeBron? So I love that. And whether you're an athlete or not, you know, I have a bad shoulder, I have a bad knee, I have a bad ankle. It's like, do you?
There are no bad body parts, just you know patterns that might cause pain. And if we can get you, and I demonstrate that with patients daily, it's like, I have a bad shoulder, my shoulder's been bothering me, and I can literally physically put their shoulder in a better place, and then their pain goes away. And it's like, I just have to teach you how to get your shoulder to stay here, and your pain's gone. You don't have a bad shoulder. Something just happened in your shoulder, stopped functioning how it was meant to.
Absolutely. All right. So I guess the last topic I really wanted to hit on is my theory on quarterbacks. So the data that is out there suggests that running quarterbacks, the plays they get hurt on most is in the pocket, which I do believe to be true. Sacks, guys coming off the blind side and getting hit, coming at your knees or ankles. And then there are some running quarterbacks like Lamar who do a great job. He gets his 5 to 10 yards, sneaks out of bounds. And you know, I just look at quarterbacks in general. They're taking on such a rushing load now. I look at a guy like Jalen Hurts, and he is pounding into the line. I mean, everyone's doing a better job of getting out of bounds, but I just feel like we talked about David Montgomery with those hits you're taking as a running back. I feel like a rushing attempt is a dangerous event to be doing generally as an athlete. I don't know. Where do you stand on all this? Because clearly when you look at Lamar, he has to run. Like, that's how he wins MVPs, because he's like, that's what makes him. But at a certain point, it's like Josh Allen, another great example, a dude who just bowls into people. And I'm like, Josh, please, I want you to play for 20 years, please. So I don't know. Are those conversations you have with quarterbacks or sort of players like, you know, David Montgomery is a between the tackles runner on the Lions. That's his job. Like, he has to do that for them. That's what they paid him all that money for. But I just feel like a rushing attempt is a dangerous event. And I don't know. Like Deebo Samuel, if he were a pure wide receiver instead of, you know, breaking 3 or 4 tackles and taking all those hits, like, would he not get hurt as much? I mean, how do you think about this? This is just like my half-baked idea of like watching the NFL and being like, all right, clearly getting hit by Fred Warner sucks, right? Or Micah Parsons. Like, I don't know. How do we quantify this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do more with body preparation than anything. Because you look at these offensive linemen, they're getting hit every single play. And
Right.
I mean, I don't know, the Bears right tackle, Darnell Wright, did not miss a game this year. And he's getting hit by Max Crosby, you know, 30 times a game. And so, yeah, the hit is slightly different, but like, you see these offensive linemen and defensive linemen that play through an entire season, and their impact is way, way higher than a quarterback getting tackled once. You know, running backs, the same thing. You see running backs play through an entire season regularly, and the hits they're taking are significantly more impactful than these quarterbacks. So I think the answer is twofold. One is they're getting hurt inside the pocket because they're not prepared for the hit. And I think that's where, you know, you fall on an outstretched arm, or you're just trying to tuck. Whereas if you're running the ball, you can prepare for hits. You're mentally prepared to take a hit. If you're dropping back in the pocket, you're not mentally prepared to take that hit. Your hope is that you get the ball off before you get hit. So that's part of it. Is the hit is slightly different in the pocket. You're not as prepared for it, and it's a little bit more awkward. The other piece is body preparation. The offensive linemen, defensive linemen, running backs, if you look at how their body is ramped up and they're prepared throughout training camp, they are hit constantly. Their body is so prepared for impact. Their tissue is more resilient in that way because they have prepared for impact. We're really scared for a quarterback to take impact. Actually, JJ, can you grab my charger, the phone charger off there for me? Thanks. We're really scared for a quarterback to take a hit because, you know, we don't want to end their season on, you know, a mistaken tackle by a defensive guy. We want to limit that, but in doing that, they're not preparing their tissue enough. So the answer isn't necessarily like, oh, have people live tackle the quarterback. But the answer definitely is closer. The answer is definitely closer to have them take more impact so that when they get hit in the game, their body is prepared for it. It's not the only hit they've taken in 2 months. Does that make sense? And so your body, there's a thing called Wolff's Law, and there's one other one that's the soft tissues. Your body is going to lay down tissue in the places that it needs tissue. Your body is going to strengthen the tissue in the places that you put demands on it. If you go do a bunch of bench press, your body's going to put more muscle on your pecs and your triceps, and that's because you're demanding more of it. If you're a running back and you're getting hit, your body is going to be more resilient in the places you're getting hit than if you're not getting hit. So a
Wow.
lot of times you see these guys that miss training camp because they're holding out for whatever reason, and then they hop back in 100%, but they've missed that whole ramp up. So the injury rate is really high for players that hold out because they haven't accommodated to that. So again, you see guys like Patrick Mahomes, who he's not necessarily a rushing quarterback, although he was the Chiefs' leading rusher in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But you see him take hits regularly, right? And his injury rate is really, really low. Then you look at what his training looks like, and his trainer, Bobby Stroop, is putting him in those positions regularly so that his
Wow.
body is used to the load. So every time he's hit, it's not his first time being in that position. His body has laid down this tissue, these protective movements. I'm sure they play these these speed and conditioning games. So your body is moving significantly different when you're playing a competitive game versus I'm just going to run some conditioning sprints. So now he's getting his body conditioned, and his tissues are just so much better prepared for this contact and being sacked and being hit in these awkward positions. Most of the quarterbacks are not doing the same thing that Patrick is doing. They're going out doing traditional strength and conditioning. They're going out and doing, traditional massage, maybe some Pilates, but they don't have they don't necessarily have one single person that they specifically work with that is putting them in these positions, that's coaching them to, to make sure they get contact. And I tell players all the time, in the off season, you should do boxing. You should be taking hits in the offseason in a controlled manner. So your first time getting hit in pads is not your first time getting hit in 3 to 6 months. Like, you should be taking body shots in boxing so that your body stays accommodated to taking hits. So there's so much tissue
Wow.
preparation. You're never going to fully prevent injuries. Football is such a random sport. It's not like you can go and prevent Aaron Rodgers' Achilles tear as he's escaping the pocket, but you can significantly minimize the risk with better preparation. And better preparation, in my opinion, is tissue preparedness. Can you take more hits? Can you put your body in those positions more often? And that way, once you get into the game like situation, it's not your first time seeing that physical situation.
Wow, that's great stuff, man. And as someone who's a casual observer from an injury standpoint, so it's not as much that it's a rushing attempt or in the pocket, or it's more the randomness where people get hurt, or sort of an unseen, unprepared for type of action than the simple way of like, oh, rushing attempts are bad, or oh, getting sacked, that's where you get. It's like the action of an unseen or unforeseen event is where a lot of these injuries kind of happen.
Exactly. And so we'll take that one step further. If you're a running quarterback, but you have not been hit at all, you have not built up that tissue resilience, every single hit you take is going to fatigue your body more because you have not built up that resilience. So if you've been
Wow.
hit, you know, 10, 15 times in a game, your risk of a random occurrence probably goes up. If your body is prepared for those hits, your risk of a random occurrence probably goes down. And again, this is all hypothetical,
Sure.
but it follows a really logical pattern, which is why I think it will stand true. So the better prepared you are, the more rushing attempts you'll be able to take and have the same randomness risk as any other quarterback in the NFL.
That that makes a ton of sense. All right, well, Michael, that's pretty much all I had for you. Is there anything you want to talk about before we head out? Maybe promote the Rehab Lab in Chicago, right?
Yep, the Rehab Lab in Chicago. There's a couple posers out there that have opened up rehab labs that do not. We're not affiliated with. We have a location in Chicago. We have a location in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we have a location in Tempe, Arizona. So if you're in any of those
Oh,
places, feel free to stop by one of our locations. It's we I like to say that to our team that we provide the highest class care in the world. And anytime you step into one of our facilities, you're going to get the best care possible in the entire world. So we got that. And if you're not in one of those places, we are working on online things. We have an online product. It's not fully ready to go, but if you do want to work with us in some online capacity, we have avenues for that. You don't have to be a professional athlete to work with us. We love working with anyone with a goal. So if that's you, just like you, Russell, if you had you know had your knee injury, that's something that even remotely, if you have questions, we can answer those questions and kind of put you on the right path there.
awesome. Love it. So Dr. Risher on Twitter/X, and anywhere else we can find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. That's actually my main social media. Is Instagram is at dr.michaelrisher. And I post tons of rehab videos, rehab advice. Twitter, I mostly try to keep up with NFL news and player news. So I don't post on there as much. But if you follow me on Instagram, that's my main social channel where I share all of the rehab tips and rehab advice. So yeah, Dr. Michael Risher on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and I think people got a lot out of it. So we will see you guys
Thanks for
next
having
time.
me. Thanks, Russell.